The shrill chime of the doorbell echoed through the late evening air, sending a shiver down my spine. I stood frozen in the living room, the flickering shadows from the old lamp casting eerie shapes against the wall as I stared at the door. It was 10:47 p.m. on October 20th, 2022, and something felt off, like an ominous weight pressing down on me. My phone buzzed with a notification, but I ignored it, my instincts screaming at me to stay silent. Just then, a loud crash pierced the peaceful night, and dread pooled in my stomach, overriding all logical reasoning. Days earlier, I had settled into my new home in the quaint town of Maple Crest, blissfully unaware that I would soon be tied to unspeakable horror. With picturesque parks and friendly neighbors, the town seemed like a postcard of Americana, yet beneath the veneer of tranquility, whispers of misfortune loomed like a shadow. I was a freelance writer, often lost in my thoughts, and the isolation of my home gave way to creeping unease that had begun to grow within me. The distant memories of the crime-ridden city I had left behind felt like a nightmare I thought I had escaped. As the night wore on, and with every ring of the doorbell, my heart pounded louder. Curiosity and fear drew me toward the door, and against my better judgment, I pressed my ear against the cold wood. Outside, I could hear hushed voices, some familiar and others strangely foreign. I hesitated, wondering if I should just call it a night and retreat into the safety of my blankets. The realization that my front porch lights were flickering made my skin crawl, as though they were warning me of the danger lurking just outside. Then a voice called out, breaking the tension like glass shattering. "Help! Someone's after me." The moment I swung open the door, I was met with a figure draped in a dark hoodie, trembling, gasping for breath. "Please," she stammered. "They're trying to kill me." My senses shot into overdrive. I scanned the street, a sinister feeling creeping up my spine, but it was too late. Almost immediately, I noticed the bloodied handprint that smeared against the wall beside her, a visceral reminder of the horror that had unfolded moments before. An echo of sirens filled the distance, but they felt worlds away, as if I were trapped in a nightmare where the outside world couldn't reach me. The woman who introduced herself as Hannah stumbled into my living room, and as I locked the door behind her, I felt the sensation of being sealed off from reality. "They were just here. I saw them," she gasped, collapsing onto my worn couch. I was torn between disbelief and horror as she recounted her harrowing escape from a maniac with a knife. Her story was jumbled, punctuated by sobs and gasps. I couldn't help but take in the details: a cut on her cheek, the wild look in her eyes, and most importantly, the sheer terror seeping from her voice. As the sirens grew closer, I knew time was running out. Moments later, the police arrived, their lights flashing like a beacon of hope. Officers flooded into my home, assessing the situation with steely resolve. Hannah's frantic explanations turned into a coherent account of her night, how she had just come from a party and was followed by a stranger since leaving the bar. The tale had an air of disbelief, yet no one could ignore the physical evidence of her distress. While an officer took her statement, others scoured the surrounding area, searching for any sign of her pursuer. The quiet of the neighborhood transformed into a chaotic scene of flashing lights and muted conversations. As the night stretched on, I found myself pacing in the kitchen, plagued by unanswered questions. Who was this man who had chased Hannah? Why did he target her? What had I inadvertently gotten involved in? The questions hung in the air like a suffocating fog. The officers had left to search nearby woods, and although they assured me I was safe, the gnawing anxiety in my gut told me otherwise. I could still hear Hannah sobbing in the living room, the weight of her trauma seeping through the walls of my home, an unwelcome guest that had taken residence among us. Hours passed before the officers returned, their faces grim and lined with fatigue. They gathered in the living room with Hannah and me, revealing what they had discovered, an unsettling warning scrawled on the bathroom wall of the bar she had left. "She belongs to me now." The word sent a chill through my body, painting a vivid picture of twisted obsession that extended beyond a mere stranger in the dark. Hannah's breathing quickened as the officers probed her memory, trying to piece together who might have been behind this terrifying encounter, but it was clear that fear had clouded her recollections. As dawn approached, the tension in the room remained palpable. I could see the weight of the mystery settling heavily on the officers as they spoke among themselves, trying to formulate a plan. But amidst their whispered conversations, Hannah's phone buzzed, its shrill sound slicing through the haze of fear. I watched as her expression changed, horror flooding her features as she read the message. "I see you." I felt my heart drop as I glanced at the officers, realizing that the nightmare was far from over. The words loomed like a dark specter, haunting us with the promise of further terror. After several hours, I finally managed to catch a few hours of restless sleep, half expecting the horror to unfold right before my eyes. Morning light filtered through the blinds, illuminating the remnants of last night's chaos, but the haunting presence lingered, much like an unwelcome scent that wouldn't wash away. As I stepped outside to retrieve the morning paper, my heart sank. There it was, the very message that had unsettled us last night, spray painted across my front porch. "I always know where you are. My hands trembled, sweat beating at my temple. We weren't safe, and whoever was out there was watching. In the following weeks, the police worked tirelessly, but the investigation led to dead ends. Hannah's attackers failed to materialize, and the insidious threat persisted, casting a pall over our once peaceful neighborhood. Each day I found myself glancing out the window, searching for any sign of movement in the shadows. The horror of that night replayed in my mind during quiet moments, leaving me constantly on edge. Hannah eventually left town, unable to bear the weight of the trauma, leaving me behind to grapple with the lingering fear that settled like a ghost in my soul. Months later, I still find myself haunted by that night. Every creak in the house, every gust of wind outside sent shivers down my spine. The police had closed the case, deeming it unsolvable, but I know the truth remains out there, lurking in the corners of Maplecrest. I often wonder who was the man that chased Hannah. Did he still live among us, just waiting for the right moment to strike? The shadows of doubt and fear cling to me like a second skin, and I am forever left wondering, when would he come for me next? I never should have ignored the warning signs, but the adrenaline coursing through my veins blinded me to the danger. It was a brisk evening on November 15th, 2021, when I first moved into Willow Lane, a quaint neighborhood that seemed too good to be true. A warm light flickered from the windows of the neighbors' homes, and laughter filled the streets. But as I unpacked my boxes, a peculiar noise broke through the comforting ambiance, a low guttural sound that seemed to emanate from the house across the street. As weeks passed, I began to notice the odd behavior of my neighbors. The Johnsons, who lived directly across from me, were a peculiar couple. They were rarely seen in the daylight, and when they were, they seemed to cast long, strange shadows. During the day, their house stood cloaked in silence, but as night descended, I could hear muffled cries and the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. My curiosity got the better of me. I couldn't help but peer through the blinds, hoping to catch a glimpse of what lay behind those curtains. What I saw sent chills down my spine. They kept large tarps in their backyard, suspiciously stained with dark patches that looked all too familiar. Despite my misgivings, I tried to fit into the atmosphere of Willow Lane, befriending other neighbors who assured me the Johnsons were simply quirky. But something did not sit right with me. One evening, I noticed the local paper had been delivered, yet the Johnsons never retrieved it. The next day, it remained untouched, and then the day after that. I felt a pit grow in my stomach. People don't just ignore their mail, and I was certain they had not left town. My instincts screamed at me, urging me to investigate further, but fear held me back. I didn't want to be the crazy neighbor who accused others without proof. One night, I finally decided to confront my fears. I walked over to the Johnsons' house, my heart racing with each step. The porch light flickered, casting an eerie glow on the peeling paint of their door. I knocked, and after what felt like an eternity, Mr. Johnson appeared, his face gaunt and eyes hollow. He hesitated before letting me in. A nervous smile plastered on his face. As I stepped inside, my stomach turned. The house was dark, the air thick and cloying, a stark contrast to the bright homes around us. What lay beyond the living area, however, sent my senses into overdrive. The back door was slightly ajar, revealing a narrow hallway that led to a dimly lit basement. I could hear the unmistakable sound of chains jingling softly, echoing against the walls. It felt as if the house itself were alive, breathing with anticipation. My gut told me to turn back, but the desire to uncover the truth propelled me forward. I took a cautious step toward the basement, the air turning colder as I approached. Before I could reach the door, however, Mr. Johnson's laughter filled the space, a sound that was all too forced and unnatural. "Don't go down there. It's just a storage area," he called out, as if he could sense my hesitation. Once I was back in my house, I could hardly sleep. My mind raced, replaying every detail from that evening. I began to comb through neighborhood records, trying to unravel the history of Willow Lane and its inhabitants. What I found sent shivers up my spine. The Johnsons had lived there for over a decade, and since their arrival, several pets and even a few children had gone missing from the neighborhood. The reports pointed towards the Johnsons' house, bumping right up against a chilling pattern. I felt bereft, as if the air had been sucked out of my lungs. I was living across the street from potential killers. In a state of helplessness, I reached out to the local authorities, but they dismissed my fears as paranoia. Frustration boiled within me as I realized no one was willing to investigate further. The Johnsons were simply eccentric after all, and not criminally liable, but I couldn't let it go. I decided to take matters into my own hands, documenting everything I observed. I invested in a camera, setting it up in my living room, aiming it toward the Johnsons' home. Each night I watched the feeds, searching for any signs of wrongdoing. What I captured left me speechless, the couple interacting in strange rituals beneath the cover of darkness. My footage revealed them carrying large sacks out to the backyard, the moonlight illuminating the grotesque shapes swaying beneath their grip. One night, I saw them pour what appeared to be a thick, dark substance over the tarps. It was as if they were trying to hide something sinister from the world, and my mind reeled with the implications. Panic overtook me as I realized I was up against unknown entities, desperate, maddened individuals capable of unspeakable horrors. I took my findings to the authorities once again, but all they did was shake their heads, brushing off my concerns as overactive imagination. As days grew into weeks, I found myself spiraling, caught in a web of paranoia. I stopped leaving the house, convinced that the Johnsons were watching me. A sense of dread settled in my bones as I thought they might retaliate against me for prying. Each creak in my own house morphed into a whispering facade, urging me to act. That evening, I finally decided to confront the darkness that lay across the street. Armed with my camera and a flashlight, I ventured over to the Johnsons, my heart pounding as I stepped onto their property. The front door swung open before I could knock, yet Mr. Johnson's expression was calm, even welcoming. I feigned innocence, asking if he wanted to chat over tea. Over tea, in their dimly lit living room. I feigned curiosity, hoping to glean anything useful. But the couple's demeanor twisted as I pryed into their lives. Their eyes darkened, and laughter faded into silence. It was as if the shadows had come alive around us, enveloping the room in an oppressive darkness. I felt a chill run up my spine as I scanned the room, noting the odd knickknacks and jars filled with contents I couldn't identify. I excused myself to the restroom under the pretense of needing to wash my hands, and once alone, panic surged. The bathroom was adorned with shrines, framed photographs of missing persons, and cluttered with objects I recognized from my research. With my heart racing and fear pooling in my gut, I realized I needed to leave immediately. I returned to the living room, a fragile smile plastered on my face while my mind raced through escape plans. Somehow, Mrs. Johnson sensed my unease, her smile now sharp and predatory. "You're not going anywhere, dear," she cooed, her voice smooth as silk yet drenched in malice. I watched in horror as Mr. Johnson stepped closer, blocking the exit. The walls of their home felt as if they were closing in on me, and in that moment the facade slipped away, revealing the monstrous truth. With a surge of adrenaline, I dashed past them, bolting out the door and into the night. The sound of their laughter chased me down the street, echoing like a twisted melody that would haunt my nightmares. I burst into my house, locking every door and shuttering every window, convinced they would come after me. The next day, I reported everything to the police once more, but with no evidence, my pleas fell on deaf ears. I packed my belongings, desperate to leave the insidious shadows of Willow Lane behind, but as I glanced back one last time, I saw the Johnsons standing on their porch, watching me with smiles that promised no good. Even now, as I sit far from there, the feeling of being watched never leaves me. I'd escaped their clutches, but I remain haunted by the weight of unknown horrors. I often wonder if the authorities ever did visit the Johnsons after I left, or if they continue their dark work unchecked. The images of their sinister rituals plague my thoughts like a ghost that refuses to fade away. And so, I ask myself, what truly lies behind the walls of unassuming homes? Could some neighbors be hiding the darkest secrets of all? The moment the sun dipped below the horizon on October 12, 2020, the town of Crescent Hollow was cloaked in a veil of darkness. The air chilled, sending goosebumps racing along my arms as I made my way toward the local tavern to meet friends. I had heard tales of the ghost of Old Man Jenkins, who disappeared mysteriously years ago, but it was a story meant to entertain, not a chilling reality. As I entered the tavern, the laughter from the crowd fell silent, and an unsettling air settled over the room when I mentioned his name, as if his ghost had just walked through the door behind me. Old Man Jenkins was a fixture in our small town, known for his wild stories and penchant for wandering the woods. But no one had seen him for over a decade, and when he vanished, the townsfolk were left with more questions than answers. Many suspected he had been swallowed by the forest, lost among the trees, and never to return. As the years rolled by, interest in his story faded, replaced by whispers of supernatural happenings and the legend of a ghostly figure seen darting through the trees. But I was determined to dive deeper, to uncover what had truly happened to him. That night at the tavern, emboldened by the dim glow of my beer, I decided to ask the locals about his disappearance. Their reactions, however, were unexpected. Eyes widened, voices lowered, and nervous glances exchanged as if the very mention of his name stirred some ancient fear from the past. "You don't want to go digging into that," one elderly man warned sharply, his eyes darting around the room as though shadows lurked just outside. I brushed off their trepidation, convinced that within every legend lay a grain of truth waiting to be unearthed. The next morning, I returned to the woods where Jenkins had often wandered, armed with a camera and a notepad. The forest was thick, with gnarled trees reaching toward the sky like skeletal hands. Sunlight barely trickled through the foliage, casting eerie shapes on the forest floor. Each step deeper into the woods felt like a descent into another world, where the air thickened and the sounds of the town faded into swallowed silence. I paused frequently, stopping to listen, shivering as gusts of wind brushed against my skin, carrying whispers of the past that sent chills down my spine. As I trekked deeper, I stumbled upon a dilapidated cabin, almost hidden by the undergrowth. Its door creaked ominously as I pushed it open, revealing a room that reeked of mildew and something else, something rotten. Old newspapers littered the floor, yellowed with age, some bearing headlines about Old Man Jenkins' last sightings. It was like stepping into a time capsule, and the revelation made my heart race. As I perused the remnants of his life, a sudden noise startled me, the sound of a twig snapping outside. My heart dropped. I was not alone. I held my breath, listening intently as the sounds approached. Thumps, dragging footsteps that sent adrenaline coursing through my veins. The feeling of being watched washed over me, each second stretching into eternity. Finally, I mustered the courage to peek out the window, and what I saw left me breathless. A figure stood in the shadows, cloaked in darkness, their outline barely discernible. They turned their heads slightly, and in that terrifying moment, I felt the weight of their gaze locking onto mine, as if they could see right through me. Panic surged within me, and I sprinted away from the cabin, heart pounding in my chest as I stumbled through the underbrush. Back at the tavern, I recounted my experience, but the locals only exchanged knowing glances, as though my run-in with the figure was an everyday occurrence. "That's just Jenkins," one laughingly said. "He's still out there, you know." I felt unease crawl over me. It was one thing to joke about the past, but quite another to dismiss my fears. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had unearthed something deeper and more sinister than local legend. I knew I had to venture back. Curiosity was a relentless monster that wouldn't let me go. The following day, armed with a flashlight and a determination that bordered on madness, I returned to the cabin. The air felt heavy with anticipation, and each creak of the floor sent ripples of anxiety through me. I began to explore more thoroughly, tracing the outlines of the room, and that's when I stumbled upon a hidden trapdoor beneath a moth-eaten rug. My heart raced as I pried it open, revealing a narrow, dark staircase leading down into the depths of the cabin. I hesitated, realizing I was now teetering on the edge of an unknown abyss. I descended the staircase, the atmosphere shifting as I plunged into the bowels of the cabin. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of decay. Flicking on my flashlight revealed a small room, walls lined with old jars containing unidentifiable substances and remnants of something long forgotten. A chilling realization gripped me. Jenkins had been doing something here, something that transcended mere wilderness wandering. Panic surged anew within me, urging me to flee, but I had to know what lay before me. What had he discovered in these woods? As I scanned the room, my eyes landed on an old journal resting atop a dusty table. As I flipped through the brittle pages, I uncovered sketches of strange symbols and unsettling passages recounting Jenkins' encounters in the woods. "They are watching us," one line read. Another spoke of rituals under the moonlight, shadows dancing in the trees. It was as if he had become a conduit for something dark and unknowable. Just then I heard a low growl emanate from the corner of the room, freezing me in place. I turned slowly, the flashlight beam quivering as I landed on a pair of glowing eyes staring back at me from the darkness. Succumbing to instinct, I darted back toward the staircase, adrenaline fueling my flight. I could feel the presence behind me growing closer, its breath hot against my back. As I burst out into the light of day, I stumbled onto the forest floor, gasping for breath. I ran, not stopping until the tavern came into view. But when I arrived, the laughter had turned to whispers. The same locals who had brushed off my fears now eyed me with suspicion, as if I had returned from a sacred place where I didn't belong. I felt like a pariah, the darkness of the woods clinging to my skin, the reality of what I had encountered too heavy to share. Days turned into weeks as I attempted to piece together what had happened, but the memories haunted me. I researched old myths surrounding Jenkins, hoping to make sense of the ominous events. To my horror, I found accounts of other people who had vanished in the woods over the years, their names echoing Jenkins's own in a haunting refrain of loss. Each account followed a similar pattern. People who ventured too far into the forest never returned, swept away by a darkness that seemed to hang over Crescent Hollow. I couldn't shake the feeling that the woods were alive, whispering of secrets that had been concealed for too long. On a whim, I decided to confront my fear and return one final time to the woods. Standing at the edge, I felt the familiar chill creep back into my bones. This time I brought the journal, determined to confront whatever force had entangled Jenkins and kept him hidden for so long. I stepped into the shadows, ready to face what lay before me, but as I moved deeper, the forest seemed to breathe around me, shifting with a life of its own. Guided by the journal's erratic notes, I ventured further into the depths of the woods, but something was different. The air grew thick, almost suffocating, and suddenly a deafening silence enveloped me. I felt the weight of countless eyes watching me from the shadows, the trees closing in as though they were built to keep me from finding the truth. I forced myself to keep going, every instinct screaming to turn back, but as darkness fell, I found a clearing. And there in the center was a stone altar surrounded by ancient markings, just like those from Jenkins' journal. The moment I stepped closer to the altar, a vision overtook me. Flashes of Jenkins' face, twisted in terror as he was consumed by shadows. The drawings he created were more than mere sketches. They were warnings, each depicting a fate that had befallen those who dared tread too far into the forest. Panic